Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And this is our first episode for 2026. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas. We're now into February, and this year is going to go really fast. My next guest, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Good afternoon, Gertrude, and thank you very much for your invite and your warm welcome. And hello to your viewers. My name is Tut Gordon Matot Tut. I'm based in Melbourne. I'm a solicitor. And today's focus and the focus of your podcast, Gertrude, piqued my interest because the expectation can sometimes be that the stories of migrants who come to Australia and progress in their careers, some people may think are the same old stories. But my view, and I'm sure it's your view that you share with your viewers, is that each and every person's story is unique and different. And my story really starts in Kenya, where as a young person, I did not realize that some of the experiences I had witnessed would shape the trajectory of my career in the law. And the reason I say that is because one of the most vivid memories that I have until today was when I was around 6 or 7 years old in Zimmerman, which is a suburb in Nairobi, where we had been playing football as young fellas in the field. And out of nowhere, there was a lot of commotion that we heard, people shouting, yelling, someone being chased. And of course, being children, we were curious to see what was going on. And to our horror, it was an instance of mob justice where an accused armed robber had been chased down by a mob of the locals, and he was stoned to death and immediately set alight and burnt to death. Burnt after he had died, I should say. Now, these had become more frequent as I was growing older. I witnessed more and more of these. And we had sort of become desensitized to seeing such scenarios happening in Zimmerman. I've witnessed no less than 4 people getting either getting stoned to death or set alight after being accused. This is without any due process whatsoever. No one calls the police to have them arrested, charged, and tried. It's as simple as we've caught you either red-handed or whatever, and you're dealt with right there and then. So why do I raise this as the first thing in this discussion regarding myself? I'm a South Sudanese refugee whose family left whose family left Nairobi in 2002. We had stayed there for 10 years after my family escaped the civil war in South Sudan in 1983. I was born in a refugee camp in Ethiopia, and I did all of my primary schooling in Nairobi. And we came to Australia in 2002, where I continued my studies in Adelaide, graduated in law at Flinders University. And whilst I had hoped to continue my career in Adelaide, um, things were really not moving as I had hoped. So I got a job in Sydney working for a criminal law firm. Um, that's where I really got my first look into the criminal justice system. And when Victoria came calling, I'd applied for a job at Victoria Legal Aid in 2017. And when I was accepted, I did not hesitate to move to Melbourne, and I've been here ever since. My career in the law has really taken me from uh, what I've described in the introduction, meaning witnessing things that as a child you would have no slight clue as to what was going on in terms of how society should function, to coming to a liberal Western democracy like Australia, where the rule of law and the system of uh, innocence until proven guilty prevails. So I've represented people for many years, most of whom have been charged with ranges of offenses, from the petty, like stealing from a shop, to the most serious, like murder and rape. And this experience, in the light of the background that I have in Nairobi, really has shaped the views that I have in respect of not only the law, but also um, things to do with policy and politics, and how individuals behave either by themselves or when they're in a group of peers. Melbourne really has become the epicenter of a lot of the discussion around crime, and particularly when it pertains to people from migrant backgrounds in general. And particularly, there's been a focus on my community, the South Sudanese community, where there's been an overrepresentation of young people in the criminal justice system. Now, this aspect of youth crime, which really pervades the media, is the relentless reporting of youth crime as something that is causing a moral panic. Uh, a community is already judged guilty before the facts are even borne out in court. And so you have a scenario where, even as a lawyer, the fact that you're from the community, which has all these issues being made public in the media, has really given me another another lens as to how the community, the wider community, functions and perceives and consumes the things that relate to the law and crime. And a lot of it is very emotive, and fair enough. When people see some of the reporting and some of the alleged crimes that young people are perpetrating on our streets, it is fair that they're getting terrified, because those are horrific allegations that are put. However, there's there's always the danger that the consumption from the media is simply there to feed the narrative of fear, rather than to educate the people on how things function after the initial shock of the incident, when someone is either captured on CCTV and then they're charged. The media conveniently forgets the whole system geared into action from when someone is charged until when they're either found guilty or acquitted. So it's quite convenient that the media will come in and report the shock allegations, then disappear and either report the end when someone is acquitted or found guilty. And then they go into overdrive again. If someone is acquitted, they don't report the full facts as to why they were acquitted, and they leave it to the community to then speculate. And that speculation is very dangerous because we have a lot of people who are, um, to be blunt, ignorant of everything. And they will jump to conclusions which are completely devoid of any fact, which are completely unsupported by any evidence. And therefore, it perpetuates the poisonous narrative, which was initiated by the first publishing of the shocking allegations that are meant to stoke fear in the community. That's if someone's acquitted. If someone is found guilty and they are sentenced to a particular sentence, yet again, the media will not bother to explain how, even if it's a brief explanation, they would not bother to explain how a particular person, based on their unique circumstances, received a particular sentence. Once again, they'll leave it to the speculation of their viewers who are utterly ignorant, and they will be once again reaching conclusions saying, oh, they got a light sentence because they're a refugee, or they got a light sentence because they feigned mental illness. All of these things are things which I hear and read in comment sections when there's an article published about a crime, whether it's a refugee or a non-refugee who has perpetrated them. So we're in a situation where the community is completely uneducated about how the system works. They're left to reach their own conclusions based on political prejudices, which are poisonous, and they erode confidence and social cohesion and confidence in the judicial system. The system, yes, it's complex, but we owe it to the community to educate them and give them a bit more of a narrative as to how things work rather than jumping to a conclusion and finding a community guilty before they're even put on trial. You're guilty by association, guilty at
Mm.
instance, and guilty always until you prove otherwise.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I really love the fact that I managed to get you at this time when there is a lot of discussion around South Sudanese community, negative perceptions that the media are actually causing more harm than good in how the stories are portrayed. Now, can you take us back a little bit to when you first arrived in Australia? What did that transition feel like for you, both emotionally and culturally, when you first got here?
Yep. We arrived in Australia on the 13th of August, 2002. Very cold it was towards the end of winter, but it was still very cold to us.
Mm.
And we landed in Adelaide. We had been sponsored by a family friend who was very close to my dad, and he had been here since the early 90s. So
Mm.
we got picked up from the airport, went to stay at his house, and we stayed there for about a week, and he really took us around and connected us to the necessary services that were required.
Mhm.
Um, and then we were connected to the local church who helped us sort out accommodation. And without wasting time, my father and mother, who were very keen on education, were looking for schools literally within the first week when we got here. And
Yeah.
um, and in that first week, that's when we got our first taste of the cultural shock. Of course, the cultural shock is always going to be there. The language barrier. I, as a young person, I was lucky to have had good education in Kenya, which was all of it instructed in English,
Okay.
and the local language Swahili was also taught. So I could understand the language, but the accent was the issue,
That's
both
difficult.
mine and of those Australians I was communicating with. So the language was the first barrier. Secondly, being new in the community and not seeing many familiar faces, it was
Mm.
always convenient and prudent to always stick to oneself and only communicate to someone who would wish to communicate to you, and that was it. So our lives were really confined to our family, friends, and our own
Mhm.
family. So we never really went anywhere other than church. And when I started going to school, it was school, back home, and church. And I remember my first experience and my brother's first experience of what we thought was some sort of unfairness and discrimination was when we had been taken to the local school to express our interest in joining in the new term. So we were living literally less than 1.5 or 2 kilometers away from the school.
Right.
And when we went there, we sat down, we did the interview with the principal, and we had our documents from Kenya, school records showing our academic
Right.
participation and the results that we used to get.
Mhm.
And the school came back to us and they said, "No, sorry, we can't have you in the school because you're not in our geographical catchment."
Oh, wow.
Um, yes. And so we ended up being accepted at a school which was about 25 kilometers away from our from our
Are you
house.
serious?
Yes. So they accepted us. So it ended up being a good thing anyway, because there were other two South Sudanese students there. And so
Right.
we had a cohort of four. And I did my high schooling at that school, at the Glenanga International High School. That's where I was lucky to get accepted. It was a fantastic school, great public school, and
Yeah. Yeah.
has a great legacy now of a lot of migrant background students who are there.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, at what point did you realize that your story was bigger than your career and that it was about representation?
At first, I had almost underestimated the importance of some of the achievements that I had managed to get under my belt. Um, I had seen so many South Sudanese at uni, so when I graduated, I thought, "Oh, that's not a big deal. There are plenty of us around here."
Mhm.
There were other students who were doing law, so I also thought, "Oh, that's not a big deal. There are other lawyers here." Um, and then I came to Melbourne. The youth crime crisis was really amplified in the media,
Yes.
and that's when I realized that, okay, there's one side that's being told here in the media relentlessly.
Yeah.
I'm on the other side. I work in the system, no doubt, but being part and parcel of the system also means that I can be an advocate not only for my client but also for the community in subtle ways. Firstly, not only by how I prepare myself and make my representations in court to everyone that I have to represent, but
Yes.
also engagement with stakeholders, people like police and magistrates and other lawyers. They have to recognize that this is also someone who uh, is beneficial in understanding the community in a
Mhm.
way that is not allowed in the hustle and bustle of the media spotlight. So I took it upon myself to then spread the the network that I wished to obtain, and
Yes.
I made sure that it was deliberate, that I engaged meaningfully with the stakeholders in all the criminal justice system, not
Right.
only because it was reputationally as an individual, that's that's what I that's what I aim to
Mhm.
to have as an individual, have integrity, have um, you know, have a backing of a good body of work based on
Yes.
competence and integrity, rather than just being seen as another lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's my intention. That has been my intention uh, since
Yes.
since I gained more experience, became a senior lawyer, and recognized that with this privilege of being a lawyer in this system, there's also
Mhm.
a responsibility to advocate for the community and be there to be the face of change, as it were,
Yeah.
given the unique position.
Now, your work in criminal law How does media coverage influence the public's perception before cases are even heard?
Well, the media is very important.
Mhm.
And one thing that the public don't know, or maybe they do, is that sometimes the police can actually invite the media to things like raids and when someone's about to be arrested and taken to a police station. So it's not a huge coincidence that when someone's being arrested at their house, the media are right out there ready to
Yeah,
capture them being. So the media narrative is important for the police in terms of their own public relations to show the
right.
community, look at how great we are, we're capturing all these people. But also the media has its own self-interest, which is to um, shock the community into
Yes.
watching their channels. If you show a great deal of positive stories, clearly that's not going to garner a lot of eyes for them and a
Yeah.
lot of viewership, which in turn increases their advertising revenue. So it's a
Yeah.
very narrow financial self-interest.
Mm, mm.
I don't begrudge them for it, but um,
Damaging.
it's quite damaging to a
Mm.
community. And the reality is that they don't care. They don't
So,
care
so,
how much damage they do to the community,
so
only
what do
for
you
their ratings.
see as being the most damaging misconceptions that you've seen about African and immigrant communities?
Well, firstly, we are all, without question, branded as criminal or suspicious. So whenever they show a lot of Africans, it's usually in the negative light, it's usually after there's been something negative that has happened. And
True.
that negativity is then amplified beyond reason or practicality.
Mm,
And the consequences be damned. They'll do what they want, they'll defame communities in general. And that's because I guess we don't have the political power or economic power to affect them. And therefore, for them, it's really David against Goliath. And
mm,
on this occasion, unfortunately, David is not winning. But I think with time, when the community grows organically and becomes more politically powerful in terms of our numbers, and economically powerful when we continue owning businesses and being involved in every sector of the economy, then and
yeah.
only then will they sit back and realize that we can exercise some power and hold them to account. And therefore, they would have to start regulating uh, and balancing their coverage of the community. And especially when it comes to things like crime, we're not saying that they should not cover crime. We're just saying cover it in fairness in the way that you cover other communities.
Yes.
You hardly see people getting called Italian Australian or Greek Australian or
Mm,
Vietnamese Australian whenever crimes happen. And when you look at the lists in the courts, the names of Africans are very few. There are hundreds of cases in
yeah.
courts every day, and majority of them are white Anglo Australians or other kinds of Australians, and they commit
Yeah.
horrible crimes, but we never see that happening in
Never
the
in the
media.
media.
It's never reported in the media with the same frequency and the same intensity and the same ferociousness as they do with African connected crime.
So, what does justice really mean to you beyond the courtroom?
I think justice has to be holistic, because the community suffers a lot from the damage that is caused from repeated narratives. And
Yeah.
we have to interact with each other every day in society. And when you have a neighbor who has been negatively influenced by the media, then unfortunately you're in a tough position. Their minds might not be changed easily.
Yeah.
They might be changed slowly by how you interact with them. But so I think there's a greater responsibility on the part of the media. The
Yeah.
courts will always provide justice. I think I have great confidence in the courts because having worked there for over a decade, it is clear that judicial independence is still paramount in Victoria and
Mm,
Australia in
yeah.
general.
Yeah.
So magistrates and judges have discretion and they use that discretion based on the evidence and the facts before them about the
Yes.
person, about the crime, and therefore they reach a sentence which, in my view, is usually uh, fair.
Then,
If we think it's unfair, then we have the right to appeal, and we usually do. And if you exhaust your chances of appeal, then at least you know you've tried everything that the system affords. Now, will there be some individuals who are discriminatory or may not like an accused simply because they're African? Of course they
mm,
are. Of course they are.
mm,
But these are things that are not so easily raised, or you can't raise them because it's done in such a way that it's insidious,
subtle. Yeah.
and yes, it's very subtle. So racism and discrimination will always
It's
exist
always
for as long as we're different.
mm,
But I think the courts have a lot of the part of their part of justice is covered well in my assessment. For me, it's more in the hands of the community in general,
yeah.
particularly the media, which is meant to educate the public, but they clearly don't. And also, for us ourselves, we must also have some introspection and see what we can do and face um, our own troubles
Yes.
uh, in addressing what we can address, and then what we can't change, unfortunately, are people's perceptions or what people say. But what we
Mm,
can change is how we see ourselves, how we treat our own problems, and
yeah.
then how we transform from a community that is challenged to one that can ultimately stand on its own too, and be counted as a, as a significant member of, of the multicultural society that we live in. Yeah.
So, how can storytelling become a form of activism and systemic change, do you think?
Well, we have to continue. We have to continue telling our stories, and change the narratives, because we cannot just sit back and be quiet and expect other people to frame our existence for us. That's
Yeah.
completely unacceptable. So we have to frame our own existence based on what we know rather than the wrong, incompetent perceptions of other people.
Yes.
We have to be very forthright, and indeed, it is appreciated by people who are keen to learn about other cultures, because you cannot, in all seriousness, consider yourself a serious adult if you reach conclusions based on um, misinformation, and then
Yeah.
you're out there confidently judging people of whom you know too little and you care about even less. And it's very shocking that the confidence with which some of these people will talk about the African community without knowing nothing about them and even caring about them less. So it is us who will be responsible for our own story, and therefore we have to amplify it through forums
Yes.
like yours and other forums. And of course, if mainstream media come knocking, then we should always be ready to make our side of the story heard
Mm.
loudly and clearly and confidently.
Now, I know when we caught up before we started recording, you've spoken about visibility. What happens when communities are invisible in leadership spaces, do you think?
Well, the first and most serious consequence is that decisions are made when the people whom the decisions affect are completely underrepresented. Their voices are not heard, and therefore the real input based on lived experience by the same people who are going to be affected by your policy decisions is not there. So the first logical step, if you're going to make a decision affecting a people, is to ensure that there are voices there who represent that community, whether
Yes.
they're elected or whether they're appointed, or whether they're just people who have experience in a particular field and expertise, who can
Mm.
provide a competent voice that can be used to then execute these policy objectives that leaders would have. And it doesn't matter whether it's private sector leaders or government leaders. So
Mhm.
visibility is critical. Visibility, not only in private spaces and government spaces, but also in the media. And independent media is very important.
Yeah.
Mainstream media is proving to be a difficult place to break into because it has significant barriers, and they have a lot of, um, I would say, old style mentality and management where
Mm,
um, some of these discussions may prove to be too uncomfortable for proprietors of mainstream news media, and
yeah.
they may not be profitable. So if it's uncomfortable and unprofitable, then
Not
to
gonna
them
go there.
it doesn't make sense. So
So
private
true.
private media, independent media, critical for visibility and
Yeah.
representation, and advocacy towards government and private institutions to continue recruiting people of a diverse background who have lived experience and who can contribute meaningfully, not only to the discussion, but also to the solution. And
Yes.
once that's done in a clear and thorough way, then and only
Okay.
then can the community have confidence going forward that integration is happening. And look, integration does not mean leaving our own cultures behind.
Yeah.
You're free to practice your culture as long as it does not conflict with the law
Yes.
and the peaceful enjoyment of other people of their own rights. So that's in a nutshell what I think when it comes to visibility.
Okay. Let's finish off with one really important question. What practical advice would you give someone who's navigating the legal system for the first time?
Um, the legal system is a complex maze at the best of times, and it's only worse once you have been charged, for example, with a crime, and you are facing the full might of the state, backed
Yes.
financially. And of course, the state has monopoly on violence, so the police can and could be violent towards you if they deem that you're not doing what they uh, are lawfully instructing you. So, my first
Yes.
advice to someone as a criminal lawyer, if you have been um, intercepted by police, whether it's on foot or by vehicle, the first thing is that yes, you are required to give your name and your address and your date of birth. And then that's where it ends. Your rights kick in. You have the right to then remain silent. After that, you can say, I would like to speak to a lawyer. And they can either organize that, or if you know a lawyer, they can give you the opportunity to call them. So always use your right to contact legal representation. And most
Yeah.
lawyers will give you some advice, especially if it's something that's urgent. They'll give you advice for free, and they'll
Okay.
explain to you what you can do on your rights. And generally, what we tell people is you have the right to remain silent. It doesn't mean that you're hiding anything. It is simply your right, because each and everything you tell the police will be used against you. And
Yes.
I have to be absolutely blunt with you. Even the police who pretend to be your friends, they'll say,
Mm,
"Oh, just tell us. You're not going to get charged. We just want to get to the truth. We want to let you go. Nothing's going to happen." As the police who tell you that are the ones who are probably the worst, because they'll
mm,
use what you say to them immediately, and they'll charge you. And then people come to court and they complain and they say, "Oh, the police seemed nice. They were telling me this and they said nothing would happen out of it. And now I'm here
mm.
in court having been charged with a crime." So, practical advice: always just give your name, your date of birth, and your address, and then tell them, "All right, that's it. I want to speak to a lawyer now. I'm not answering any more questions whatsoever." And you have every right to do that. And you can keep them there for hours in silence, unless I don't think they'll be crazy enough to wait long enough. They'll probably just leave, or they'll call a lawyer if it's serious enough for you to
Mhm.
get that legal advice. So
Okay.
never speak
Yeah.
to police by yourself, um,
Get representation.
unless you have received legal advice and legal representation.
Is there anything else I should have asked you and I didn't?
Um, Look, I think it felt like it has gone very quickly, so it
Gone
means
very
that we
fast.
we had a good discussion indeed. Um, Look, the breadth of what we have covered, I think, has allowed me to go on and on and on a bit about a few different things.
Yeah,
Nothing jumps out at me immediately.
that's good.
Nothing
That
jumps
is
out at
good.
me immediately.
No, thank you. And thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story. One of the objectives of this podcast is to shine a light on those African professionals who live here in Victoria, showing people who we are, the businesses we run, the professions that we have followed, and just ready to demonstrate that we are positive contributors to this economy. And I think that's the missing thing. And independent media, like small podcasts like mine, are able to do that because nobody's going to pick us up and talk about us unless we share our own stories. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very
Thank
much, Gertrude, once again, and appreciate you for the invite. All the best with the podcast, and good afternoon to you and your viewers.
It's an absolute honor. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. The Diversity Connector is a platform that shares the stories of people from diverse backgrounds. We share these stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to educate you on how to understand diverse cultures, how to deal with us, how to live with us, and understand the challenges that we face on a day-by-day basis. So I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody, with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thank you again for the interview.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely stay connected. Thank you so much.